I was 31 when I decided to adopt a dog. This was fall of 2019, and I'd just bought my first house in a suburb outside Portland. I worked from home as a software developer and thought a dog would be good company. I'd always wanted one as a kid, but my parents never allowed it. Now I had my own place, my own rules. I went to the local animal shelter on a Saturday morning. The place was clean and well-maintained, run by volunteers who clearly cared about the animals. I walked through the kennel area, looking at different dogs. Some barked excitedly, others cowered in the backs of their cages. I felt sorry for all of them but knew I could only take one home. Then I saw him. A medium-sized mixed breed, maybe part German Shepherd, part something else. He was sitting calmly in his kennel, not barking like the others, just watching me with intelligent brown eyes. The volunteer said his name was Max. He was about 3 years old, and he'd been at the shelter for 2 months. She said he was well-behaved, house-trained, good with people. I asked about his history. The volunteer hesitated, then said he'd been surrendered by his previous owner, who couldn't keep him anymore. No other details. That should have been my first red flag, but I was eager to adopt, and Max seemed perfect. I filled out the paperwork, paid the adoption fee, and took him home that afternoon. The first few days were great. Max was calm, obedient, didn't destroy anything. He'd follow me from room to room while I worked, always staying close but not demanding attention. At night, he'd sleep on a dog bed in my bedroom. He was the perfect companion. I felt lucky to have found him. Then, about a week after the adoption, something strange happened. I was working in my home office when Max suddenly stood up and walked to my office window. He stared outside, completely still, for almost 5 minutes. I looked out the window to see what had caught his attention. Just the quiet suburban street, nothing unusual. But Max remained fixated, his body tense, like he was watching something I couldn't see. This started happening regularly. Multiple times a day, Max would go to windows and stare outside. Sometimes for a few minutes, sometimes for longer. Always the same intense focus. I thought maybe he was bored and just watching for squirrels or birds. But his body language was wrong. He wasn't curious or playful. He was alert, watching. About 2 weeks after the adoption, I came home from a grocery run to find Max sitting in my living room staring at the front door. Not just looking at it, but positioned directly in front of it, stock still, focused. I'd only been gone 30 minutes. When I came in, he didn't greet me like usual. He just kept staring at the door for another minute before finally turning to acknowledge me. Then the barking started. Max had been quiet since I adopted him. Maybe a bark or two when someone came to the door. Normal dog behavior. But now he started barking at night. He'd wake me up at 2 or 3 in the morning, standing at my bedroom window barking intensely at the darkness outside. I'd get up, look out, see nothing. Just the empty street, the neighbors' dark houses, nothing to bark at. I took him to a vet, thinking maybe something was medically wrong. The vet examined him and said he was healthy. Asked about his behavior. I explained the window watching, the nighttime barking. The vet suggested it might be anxiety from his previous home situation and recommended a dog behaviorist. Before I could make that appointment, something happened that changed everything. It was a Tuesday night, around 11 p.m. I was getting ready for bed when Max started his intense barking at the bedroom window. I was exhausted and frustrated. I yelled at him to be quiet. He didn't stop. He was barking frantically, more aggressive than I'd ever heard. I went to the window to prove to him there was nothing there. I pulled back the curtain and looked out into the dark street. At first, I didn't see anything. Then my eyes adjusted. There was someone standing across the street. A man, just standing on the sidewalk, facing my house. He was too far away and it was too dark to see details. But he was clearly there, completely still, watching my house. My stomach dropped. Max was still barking. I quickly closed the curtain and grabbed my phone. I watched through a gap in the curtain. The man stood there for another minute, then slowly walked away, down the street and out of sight. I called the police non-emergency line. They said they'd send someone to patrol the area, but there wasn't much they could do about someone standing on a public sidewalk. After that night, I started paying more attention to Max's behavior. I realized he wasn't randomly staring out windows. He was watching for something specific, and the timing was consistent. He'd become alert around the same times each day. Late morning around 10, early evening around 6, and late at night around 11. I decided to test something. The next time Max went on alert at the living room window during the day, I didn't dismiss it. I watched with him. After about 10 minutes, I saw it. A car drove slowly down the street, slower than normal traffic. It was a dark sedan, tinted windows. It drove past my house, paused briefly, then continued on. Max's eyes followed it the entire time. I started documenting this. Every time Max alerted to a window, I'd note the time and watch to see what happened. The pattern became clear. That same dark sedan would drive by my house at those specific times, multiple times a day, just cruising past slowly, sometimes pausing. Max had been trying to warn me. Someone was watching my house. I reported this to the police with my documentation. They took it more seriously this time. They ran the license plate I'd managed to capture. The car was registered to a man named David Chen. That name meant nothing to me. The police said they'd investigate. 2 days later, a detective called me. He asked if I'd adopted a dog recently. I said yes. He asked from which shelter. I told him. He said they needed to come by and talk to me. When they arrived, they brought troubling information. David Chen was the previous owner of Max. He'd surrendered Max to the shelter, claiming he couldn't keep him anymore. But that wasn't the full story. Chen had been going through a difficult divorce. His wife had left him, got a restraining order. She'd taken their dog, Max, with her when she left. Chen had repeatedly violated the restraining order, showing up at her new home, following her. She'd given Max to the shelter to protect the dog and herself, hoping Chen couldn't track her through the pet. But Chen had been monitoring the shelter's adoption listings. When Max was adopted, Chen had figured out that he could track his ex-wife by finding whoever adopted the dog. He'd been staking out my house for 2 weeks, thinking I might lead him to her or that she might visit. He'd been using Max as a way to find her. The police arrested Chen for stalking and violating the restraining order. They found evidence he'd been photographing my house, documenting my routines, waiting for any connection to his ex-wife. I'd unknowingly become part of his obsession simply by adopting his dog. The detective said Chen's ex-wife was safe. She'd moved out of state months ago and had no connection to me. But Chen had been so fixated he couldn't accept she was gone. He'd latched onto Max as his last link to her. And Max, trained by months of Chen's surveillance behavior, had recognized his old owner's car and patterns. The dog had been trying to warn me the entire time. I felt violated. I'd adopted a dog for companionship and instead inherited someone else's dangerous obsession. The police said Chen would likely face jail time. The shelter apologized, said they hadn't known the full extent of Chen's issues when he surrendered Max. They should have done more thorough screening. I considered returning Max to the shelter, but I couldn't. He'd tried to protect me. He'd been alerting me to danger I didn't understand. Instead, I kept him. I also installed a security system, cameras, and motion lights. I moved to a different house 6 months later, took Max with me, made sure to cover my tracks so Chen couldn't find us when he got out of jail. Max is still with me. He's 4 years old now. He doesn't stare out windows anymore. He's relaxed, happy, finally just a normal dog. But sometimes late at night, if he hears a car drive slowly past the house, he'll lift his head and listen. And I'll listen too. Because Max taught me that sometimes the threats we face aren't random. Sometimes they're attached to the things we bring into our homes. And sometimes, the most loyal companion is the one who's trying to warn us about dangers we can't see. I'm 34 now. 3 years have passed since I adopted Max. I still think about those weeks of being watched, unknowingly caught in someone else's stalking behavior. I learned that pet adoption isn't always just about giving an animal a home. Sometimes you're inheriting their history, their trauma, their connections to people who won't let go. And sometimes the animal knows more than you do about the danger you're in. You just have to learn to listen. I was 28 when I adopted Luna. This was spring of 2020, right at the start of COVID lockdowns. I was living alone in a small apartment in Boston, and the isolation was getting to me. I'd always been a cat person, and thought adopting one would help with the loneliness. I found Luna through a local rescue organization's website. Luna was a beautiful, long-haired grey cat, about 2 years old. Her profile said she'd been found as a stray and had been in foster care for several months. The rescue emphasized she was shy and would need a patient owner, perfect for my quiet lifestyle. I filled out an application, had a video interview, and was approved. They delivered Luna to my apartment on a Saturday afternoon. The foster mom who brought her seemed nice but rushed. She handed me Luna in a carrier, gave me a folder with vet records and care instructions, and left within 10 minutes. Looking back, that should have raised questions, but I was excited to finally have a pet. I let Luna out of the carrier and watched as she explored my apartment cautiously. For the first week, Luna was exactly as described. Shy, hiding under furniture, only coming out to eat, and used the litter box when she thought I wasn't watching. I'd sit near her hiding spots and talk softly, trying to build trust. By the second week, she started warming up. She'd sit in the same room as me, eventually even jumping onto the couch beside me. Then I started noticing strange behaviors. Luna would sit and stare at my apartment door for hours, not just occasional glances, but fixed, intense staring, like she was waiting for something or someone. When I'd get up to check what she was looking at, there'd be nothing there. No sounds in the hallway, no smells that might attract her attention, just the door. She also had an unusual reaction to certain sounds. If I dropped something, she wouldn't startle like a normal cat. She'd freeze completely, then slowly back away while keeping her eyes on me. If I raised my voice even slightly while on a phone call, she'd disappear under the bed for hours. It was like she was terrified of sudden noises, but in a specific, learned way. About a month after the adoption, I was working from home when I heard Luna make a sound I'd never heard before. Not a meow or a purr, a low, guttural growl. I found her in the bedroom, first standing on end, staring at the closet. The closet door was closed. There was nothing visible that should cause that reaction. I opened the closet to show her it was empty, just my clothes and shoes. She wouldn't enter the room for the rest of the day. This happened several more times over the next weeks. She'd growl at closed doors, at dark corners, at my bathroom when the door was shut. Always the same defensive posture, like she was protecting herself from something. I took her to a vet, thinking she might have vision problems or neurological issues. The vet examined her and said she was physically healthy, probably behavioral issues from her past. I reached out to the rescue organization, asking for more information about Luna's history before foster care. They were vague, just repeated that she'd been found as a stray. I asked to speak to the foster mom who'd brought her to me. They hesitated, then said she was no longer fostering for them. They wouldn't give me her contact information, citing privacy. That felt wrong. I did some digging online. I found the foster mom's name in old social media posts from the rescue organization. I searched for her and found her Facebook profile. It was mostly private, but I could see she'd posted in a local lost and found pets group around the time she would have started fostering Luna. The post said, "Found this cat in neighborhood. Very scared. Anyone missing her?" The neighborhood she mentioned was only about 2 miles from my apartment. I'd assumed Luna was from somewhere far away, brought to the rescue through a network, but she'd been found close by. I started checking lost pet postings from that time period in local groups and on websites. After hours of searching, I found something. A missing cat poster from about 6 months before Luna's rescue posting. A grey, long-haired cat looked identical to Luna. The poster was from a woman named Sarah Mitchell. The cat's name was Cleo, not Luna. The poster said, "Missing since November 2019. Last seen in same neighborhood. Please help us find her." There was a phone number. I stared at the photo. It was definitely Luna. The same distinctive white patch on her chest. Same face markings. The timing matched. This cat had been someone's pet, had gone missing, and somehow ended up at the rescue with a new name. I didn't know what to do. Should I call the number? What if I was wrong? I decided to call. A woman answered. I explained carefully that I'd adopted a cat from a rescue and thought it might be her missing cat. I sent her a photo. She called me back within minutes, crying. She said it was definitely Cleo. She'd been searching for 6 months. Where had I gotten her? I explained about the rescue, the foster mom, the adoption. Sarah was confused and upset. She said she'd never surrendered Cleo, never given her away. Cleo had disappeared from their yard one day. They'd searched everywhere, filed reports, posted flyers. How did Cleo end up at a rescue? We agreed to meet. Sarah came to my apartment the next day. When Luna saw her, the cat's reaction was immediate and dramatic. She ran to Sarah, meowing frantically, rubbing against her, behavior I'd never seen from the shy, reserved cat I'd lived with. There was no question. This was Sarah's cat. They knew each other. Sarah was crying, holding Cleo. I was crying too, but not entirely from happiness. I'd grown attached to Luna over the past 6 weeks, but this wasn't my cat. She belonged to someone else. Sarah explained that Cleo had been indoor only, but had escaped when someone left the back door open. She'd searched for weeks, never gave up hope. But how did Cleo end up at the rescue? We called them together, with Sarah on speaker. When confronted with the situation, the rescue coordinator sounded shocked. She said the foster mom had told them Cleo was found as a stray with no microchip, no collar, no one looking for her. They'd done standard due diligence, checked lost pet reports, held her for the legal stray hold period. Sarah said she'd filed reports with animal control, all the local shelters, posted on every online group. How had the rescue missed this? The coordinator said they'd investigate. She called back an hour later with disturbing information. The foster mom had apparently been finding or taking cats from neighborhoods, holding them just long enough to claim they were strays, then turning them in to rescues for adoption. She got paid a small fostering stipend and apparently enjoyed the attention of saving animals. This woman had been stealing people's pets. Cleo wasn't the first. The rescue had discovered at least 3 other cases in the past year where cats in her care had later been identified as someone's missing pet, but by then they'd already been adopted out to new homes. The rescue was appalled, said they'd terminated their relationship with this foster and reported her to authorities. Sarah took Cleo home. I was devastated to lose Luna, but I knew it was right. Sarah offered to pay back the adoption fee I'd paid. I refused. I was just glad Cleo was home, but I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. The rescue organization had assured me Luna was a stray. They'd done background checks on me, but apparently hadn't properly vetted their foster. I'd unknowingly participated in pet theft. A few weeks later, authorities charged the former foster mom with multiple counts of theft and fraud. She'd been taking cats from yards and neighborhoods, sometimes cats she'd seen roaming, sometimes cats she'd specifically targeted. She'd disable or remove their collars and microchips if they had them. She'd hold them long enough that they'd appear traumatized and ownerless, then turn them in as rescues. She made a small amount of money from fostering fees and liked the social recognition of being an animal rescuer. The case made local news. Several other families came forward, saying they recognized their lost cats in the foster's old social media photos. But many of those cats had already been adopted to people in other states. Reuniting them became complicated. Some new owners refused to give them up, having bonded with the animals. Legal battles ensued. I learned that Luna's strange behaviors, the door staring, the fear of certain sounds, weren't just trauma from being a stray. She'd been stolen from her home. She'd been waiting by my door hoping her real family would come through it. She'd been afraid of sudden noises because the foster had probably been rough with her while hiding her from her actual owners. The closed-door phobia might have been from being locked in rooms to keep her hidden. I adopted a different cat a few months later, through a different rescue with much stricter protocols. But I never forgot Luna, or Cleo as she really was. I still think about those 6 weeks when I thought she was mine. How excited I'd been to finally have a pet. How that excitement was built on someone else's loss. I learned that pet adoption isn't always the heartwarming story it seems. Sometimes, there are darker truths behind those animals in need. And sometimes the rescue isn't a rescue at all. It's covering up a crime. I'm 31 now. 3 years have passed since I adopted Luna and had to give her back. I still see Sarah sometimes at a local park where she walks Cleo on a leash. We're friendly now, bonded by the strange situation that brought us together. Cleo seems happy, fully recovered from her ordeal. And I have my own cat now, Milo, who I know with certainty was actually a stray, but I'm more careful now. I ask more questions, I verify stories, because I learned that not everyone involved in animal rescue has pure intentions. Sometimes predators hide behind the guise of helping, and the animals pay the price. I was 25 when I saw the ad on Craigslist. This was summer of 2018, and I was renting a small house in Austin with a fenced backyard. I'd been wanting a pet, but couldn't afford the adoption fees at shelters. The ad said, "Free rabbit to good home. Includes cage and supplies. Must pick up today." It seemed perfect. Low maintenance pet, free, just needed to pick it up. I called the number. A man answered, sounded friendly enough, said his daughter was allergic and they needed to rehome the rabbit quickly. He gave me an address in a neighborhood about 20 minutes away. I drove over that afternoon. The house looked normal from outside. Suburban, well-maintained, nothing unusual. The man who answered the door matched the friendly voice on the phone. Mid-40s, casual clothes, seemed harmless. He invited me in to see the rabbit. That should have been my first warning. Most people doing free pet handoffs meet you outside or in the driveway, but I was naive and eager to get the rabbit. Inside, the house was clean but felt off somehow. Too quiet. No signs of a kid living there despite him mentioning a daughter. No toys, no photos on the walls. Just generic furniture and empty walls. He led me to a back room where a large rabbit cage sat on a table. Inside was a brown and white rabbit, looked healthy, munching on hay. The man said the rabbit's name was Pepper. She was about 2 years old, very friendly. He handed me a folder with vet records and care information. Everything seemed legitimate. I asked a few questions about her diet and habits. He answered everything perfectly, like he really knew the animal. I picked up the cage, thanked him, and left. For the first few weeks, Pepper was great, friendly, litter-trained, loved hopping around my living room. I'd let her out of her cage during the day while I worked from home. She was exactly the easy pet I'd wanted. Then I started noticing something strange. Whenever my doorbell rang, Pepper would freeze. Not just startle, but freeze completely, ears back, pressed flat to the ground, like she was terrified. This seemed like an overreaction, but I figured maybe she'd had a bad experience with door sounds in her previous home. I didn't think much of it. Then one day, about a month after I'd adopted her, I heard a knock at my door. I looked through the peephole. It was the man who'd given me Pepper. Standing on my porch, hands in his pockets, looking at my door. I didn't open it. I watched through the peephole. He waited for maybe 30 seconds, then reached out and tried my door handle. It was locked. He tried it again, harder. Then he stepped back, looked around my yard, and walked away. My heart was pounding. What was he doing at my house? Why was he trying my door? I called the police non-emergency line. They said they'd send someone to check the area. By the time the officer arrived, the man was gone. The officer took my statement, noted the address where I'd picked up the rabbit, and said he'd follow up. 2 days later, I was home working when I noticed something in my backyard. A section of the fence in the far corner looked disturbed. I went out to check. Someone had partially loosened several fence boards, enough that they could be pushed aside to create a gap large enough for a person to squeeze through. Fresh dirt and footprints were visible. Someone had been in my yard. I called the police again. This time they took it more seriously. They found the fence damage, photographed the footprints, and did a more thorough check of my property. They found a cigarette butt near where someone had stood by my back window. They collected it for DNA. The officer asked more questions about the rabbit adoption. He wanted the exact address where I'd picked her up. The next day, a detective called me. He said they'd gone to that address. The man who'd given me the rabbit didn't live there. That house belonged to an elderly couple who'd been on vacation when I'd picked up Pepper. They'd just gotten home and were shocked to hear someone had been using their house while they were away. The man had apparently been house-sitting for them, but they'd never asked him to. He'd somehow gotten their schedule and keys. The detective asked if I still had the vet records the man had given me. I did. They were fake. The detective explained they'd been looking for this man for several months. He'd been using free pet listings as a way to get into people's homes. He'd either steal pets or find them, then list them for free or cheap. When people came to pick them up, he'd note their address from their driver's license or registration, or follow them home if he could. Then he'd use that information to case their houses, looking for opportunities to burglarize them. The rabbit he'd given me wasn't his. She'd probably been stolen from someone else. He'd kept her just long enough to use her as bait. The vet records, the whole story about his daughter being allergic, all lies. And now he knew where I lived, had tried my door, and had been in my yard. The detective said I was lucky, I'd kept my doors locked. He'd broken into 3 other houses using this method. People who'd adopted pets from him, trusted him because he seemed nice, and then came home to find they'd been robbed. They eventually caught him, not because of my case, but because he tried the same scam again, and someone recognized him from a security camera photo the police had distributed. He was arrested and charged with multiple burglaries, trespassing, and fraud. They recovered some stolen property, but not everything. What disturbed me most was how calculated it had been. He'd found an empty house while the owners were away, used it as a staging ground. He'd researched enough about rabbits to sound knowledgeable. He'd created fake paperwork that looked legitimate, all to get into people's homes and cases their security. And the pet was just a prop, a living prop he'd probably stolen from someone else. I tried to find Pepper's real owner, posted her photo in lost pet groups, contacted local rabbit rescues. No one ever claimed her. Whoever she belonged to either didn't see my posts or had given up looking, so I kept her. She lived with me for 4 more years before passing away naturally. She was a good rabbit, but I never forgot how she came into my life, as bait in someone's scheme to rob me. The case made me paranoid about any free pet listings. I learned that predators use our love of animals against us. They know people looking to adopt pets are often kind-hearted, trusting, eager to help an animal in need. Those traits make us vulnerable. We let our guard down around someone offering a free pet. We don't ask enough questions. We go to strange addresses. We give out our information freely. And sometimes, the person offering isn't rehoming a pet at all. They're running a con. And the animal is just collateral damage in their scheme. I'm 28 now. 3 years have passed since that summer with Pepper. I still think about that man standing on my porch, trying my door handle, knowing I was inside. About him, standing in my backyard, looking through my windows, planning when to break in. About how close I came to being another one of his victims. I learned that free doesn't always mean safe. Sometimes it means someone is getting something from you that you didn't realize you were giving. And sometimes that something is access to your home, your security, your vulnerability, all wrapped up in something innocent like a rabbit in a cage.